We're in the middle of Kiddush yesterday. We got up to the words, Kiddushalu b'mitzvosav. You sanctified us by your commandments. Now this has at least two different meanings. One is that when a Jew performs a mitzvah, that mitzvah has in it holiness, and it has an influence on him. It influences him with a spark of holiness. And that, I think, is pretty well appreciated. Especially since we use that phraseology every time we do a mitzvah. We have a bracha on the mitzvah. But there's another meaning, which is that when he gave us the mitzvos, when he gave us the Torah at Sinai, that projected into us a certain holiness with which we do the mitzvah. Now we get it from the mitzvah, but it's a kind of pre-qualification for doing the mitzvah. The Ramchal, although he doesn't mention it on these words, Ramchal explains the idea like this. A Jew, when he does a mitzvah, is connected to the world in certain ways, and he brings about certain changes in the structure of the world, metaphysically. And the question is, how does he do that? He does the mitzvah, moving his body one way or another. What does that have to do with the hidden spiritual structure of the world? So that connection, that power to affect those aspects has to be projected into him. And the Ramchal likens it to someone who's a messenger of the king, and the king gives him a document. And the document says, this person represents me, and when he does something, he's doing it with the king's authority. So, okay, he shows that to people, they pay attention. When a Jew does a mitzvah, he's doing it, so to speak, with the king's authority, and that's how it can affect the way in which the world runs in a spiritual fashion. And that, receiving that, so to speak, authority, which is like the document from the king, that's what happened when we received the Torah. He sanctified us by giving us the commandments. Now, God gave us, in love, this year we're going to add in the parenthesis, because it's coming out on Shabbos, Shabbosos l'menucha, for rest. We explained rest last time. Mo'adim l'simcha. Moed is one of the words that's usually translated as holiday. Chagim zmanim l'sasom. So what we need to explain is what's the difference between moed on the one hand as a word for a holiday versus chag and zman, and what is the difference between simcha and sasom. The Gaon of Vilna says the difference between simcha and sasom is this. Simcha is what happens when you plan for something and you work for it, and then your efforts are successful. Simcha is the result of a plan, a project, and the project comes to fruition. Sason is something unexpected. David HaMelech says, I rejoice on your word as like someone who finds a great treasure. Usually you find a great treasure by accident. There are treasure hunters, I understand, but usually, you're digging in the backyard and you hit some metal and it turns out to be a chest of gold. So, sason is what happens when you have something that's unexpected. And it's said by a wedding, Sheva Brachas, when we say sason and simcha, that in wedding you have both. You plan to get married, you chose this person, she chose you. So obviously there's a project here, and you have resources, and you plan the outcome, and it's successful, that's simcha, but there are always surprises. And sometimes the surprises are very happy surprises. So that's sason. So that's the difference between the two levels of joy. Now, what is a moed and what is a chag and a zman? The word moed comes from a word which means to meet. Avad in modern Hebrew is a committee. Moed is either meeting time or meeting place. The place where Moshe Rabbeinu got instructions from HaKadosh Baruch Hu was called the Ohel, Moed, the tent of meeting, it's sometimes translated, because he went there to meet, so to speak, with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. Moed in time is a time that's dedicated to a meeting between the Kodesh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael. And if you look at the list of Moadim in Parshas Emor, and you analyze them, you can see this. The three great holidays of the year, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, are pilgrimage holidays. You went up to Yerushalayim, and you appeared in the temple. That's definitely a meeting. On Rosh Hashanah, you blow the shofar, and the Torah says, the Chazal say, when you blow the shofar, it's as if you are in the Holy of Holies. And that's why you can blow the shofar, according to what the Chachamim, you can't use a shofar from a cow, because the cow is the species that gave us the golden calf, and the golden calf was a terrible crime. And we have a rule, en kategor sanegor, that which was used in a way that's illicit, that's criminal, can't be used in your defense. So you can't use the shofar from a cow. You can use it from a goat or a sheep, but not from a cow. That's because en kategor. But now, the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur was only allowed to wear white clothes, not golden clothes, because of the same reason, but that's only when he went into the Holy of Holies. On Yom Kippur, when he did the regular avoda outside, he did wear the golden clothes. So this principle, en kategor nasa saneger, only applies when you go into the Holy of Holies. What has it got to do with blowing shofar? Answers the Gemara, when you blow shofar, it's as if you're standing in the Holy of Holies. Quite a remarkable idea. So, that being the case, that means when you blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah, it's as if you're standing in the Holy of Holies. That's also a meeting. Yom Kippur, the Torah says, Lifnei Hashem titharu, purify yourselves before Hashem, because on Yom Kippur you're all standing before Hashem. It's also like standing in the temple. So all 5 of those holidays are meeting times. That's what it means to call the holiday a moed. Now, a meeting time, when you go for a meeting, so the meeting is something you prepare for. So simcha fits very well with the idea of a meeting time. Chagim and zmanim, chag means a celebration. It also refers to a particular sacrifice, although the Gemara has to go to great lengths to learn that. The semantic meaning of chag means celebration. Zman means something which is a particular time of the year, because the times of the year are not uniform. Different times have different powers, different potentialities. There you can, the word is used, sason, I think could be just for contrast, because you do sometimes plan for these things. But at any rate, what you get from this is that the holiday is complex. It has many different dimensions. And the one that's mentioned first, and the one that's mentioned in the Torah most prominently, Moed, Moed's a meeting time, and that in a certain way is the essence of it. It's a time when a connection is made between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Jewish people that's a special, intense connection with certain particular qualities, which are expressed by the various mitzvos that are done on the holidays, and that generates great simcha, great joy. Now, I will just mention one word about the idea of zman. The common idea, which you find in the sources, is that an event happened on a certain day. That event creates a certain potential for that day from there on. And that's the reason why many of the holidays we celebrate by doing the same actions that were done on the original occurrence of that holiday. We have a Seder on the first night of Pesach, because they had a Seder in Egypt. That Seder in Egypt was accompanied by Exodus and achieving of a freedom you didn't have before. We do those mitzvos over again every year, and that accesses the freedom potential of that night, which it has from then on. And so it is with Egypt. We dwell in sukkahs because that's what they did when they were under the clouds of glory, and that accesses the special protection and special divine providence that they experienced. We do what they did, that activates that potential. That's the common idea, and it's right. The idea is right. But there are those who take it a step further. Let's ask, was it a mere accident that we left Egypt on the 15th of Nisan? What I just told you in the last 3 minutes would make it sound like, let's see, when did we leave? Oh, it says right there in the history book, 15th of Nisan. Aha! So that's why the 15th of Nisan is an Exodus day. It's an Exodus day because we left on that day. That leaves it open as arbitrary, but why was it that day? If we had left Egypt on the 10th of Nisan, on the 23rd of Sivan, so we'd have said that that day has the potential. And according to this deeper idea, I'm disappointed that Ramchal doesn't mention this idea, but others do. The 15th of Nisan was planned to be an Exodus day from the creation. That's why we left on the 15th of Nisan. It wasn't arbitrary at all. A little hint to this is in the famous pasuk, "Hayom atem yotzim mechodesh aviv." You are leaving now in the month of the spring. And the Torah is not just advertising that it's good weather. You should be thankful to Kodesh Baruch Hu because it was pleasant weather. So no, you had to leave in the springtime. Why? Who knows? But it's clear that it was planned that way. It had to be a springtime exodus. So according to this idea, the 15th of Nisan was set aside to be the Exodus day from the creation. That's why we left on the 15th of Nisan. The actions that they were told to do on the 15th of Nisan and the year they left for Egypt are the actions which access this potential which they had from before then. So that's why we do it. We don't do it as a commemoration of what happened to them on that particular occasion. We do it to access the potential that this day had even before those events took place. At any rate, that's the idea of zman. It happens at this zman because this zman, this time is a special time. It's not like other times. Each time has its own character. Now, here's something that I want to teach you because it's really, I think, it's really very important. Please get Chomashim. I want to show you a pasuk, and then I'll teach you what this says here. What I'm telling you now is a Kedushas Levi. Until I saw the Kedushas Levi, I didn't even notice the pasuk, but the diuk in the pasuk is right there. I need a Chumash also. It's not where the Hagaddah is. Thank you. Yeah.
If so Pesach this year falls on Friday nights, Shabbos, do we still have the Shabbos Seder, like Shalom Aleichem and that, or is it not set?
No. You don't say the Shalom Aleichem. What you do say is Vayichulu for Kiddush.
So you go straight to Kiddush. There's none of the before.
Right. But the Vayichulu in Kiddush is different. Because you don't usually say Vayichulu in the Kiddush on a holiday. Right? And this time we will say it. This is in the end of Bamidbar. Okay, take a look on page 903. This is Bamidbar, Perek Lamed Aleph. Numbers chapter 31. Hashem spoke to Moses saying, "Take vengeance for the children of Israel against the Midianites. Afterwards you'll be gathered as your people." This is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe to do. Take vengeance for the children of Israel against the Midianites. Okay, the next verse, verse 3. Moses spoke to the people saying, "Arm men from among yourselves for the legion, that they may be against Midian, to inflict Hashem's vengeance against Midian." That's not what Hashem said. Hashem said, vengeance for the children of Israel. Moshe changed it. That's striking. Does he have reshus to change things like that? So, the Levi says, what you see here is that each one is looking at it from the other one's point of view. The Midianites caused us a terrible tragedy. The women seduced the men, and they bowed to idols, participated in idol worship. Hashem says this was a tragedy for the Jewish people, and their vengeance that is owed to them should be worked on the Midianites. Tell the Jewish people to do war against the Midianites to achieve their vengeance against Midian. Hashem is speaking from the Jewish people's point of view. Moshe Rabbeinu says, when we take it up, we're going to take it up from Hashem's point of view. We're going to take it up as Hashem because it was a terrible desecration of God's name, what the Jews did with the Midianites. So he suffered, so to speak. His name suffered. So we're going to take vengeance for his name. Now, says the Kedushas Levi, this is typical of two people who love each other. When you have two people who love each other, each one sees the situation through the other one's eyes. Each one cares about what the other one is suffering. This, how shall I say, reflectiveness, that each one sees the situation with the other one's eyes, says the Kedushas Levi, is also expressed in the names of the holidays. We're now doing the Kiddush for Pesach, right? Because that's the next coming holiday, right? It's Pesach. The coming holiday is never called Pesach in the Torah. Never. What is it called?
Like Chag HaMatzot or something?
Chag HaMatzot. That's right. That's the next words in the Kiddush. Right? So what's going on? The Torah has a title for this holiday. Chag HaMatzos. But we don't use that. The title of the Torah. We have our own title. But why? Why not call it by the name that the Torah calls it? Because Chag HaMatzos is the Kodesh Baruch Hu's name for the Chag in terms of the mitzvah that we do. He sees it through our eyes, what we're doing. The word Pesach refers to what he did when he visited the plagues on Egypt, and the firstborn and our firstborn were saved. So our word Pesach refers to what he did. His term Chag HaMatzos refers to what we do. Same thing. Each one seeing it through the other one's eyes. Rosh Hashanah. Nowhere in the entire Tanakh do you have the phrase Rosh Hashanah. Ain't davar kazeh. What is it called in the Torah, that holiday?
Trua?
It's a good try. Zichron Trua or Yom Trua? A day of the shofar blowing or a memory of the shofar blowing? Trua is what we do. Kodesh Baruch Hu's name for the holiday is our mitzvah of Trua. We don't call it Yom Trua. We call it Rosh Hashanah. Why? Because he created the world then. He's referring to our mitzvah, we're referring to what he did. Sukkos we both use the same way. Shavuos. Shavuos is the Torah's name for the holiday. We do use the term Shavuos for the holiday, but the rabbinic term that you find in the Gemara is Atzeres. Atzeres refers back to Pesach. It's something held over from Pesach. And that our term for it refers to what he did and what we received and what we held over from what we received from him. So the Levi says that you see that the holidays, the names of the holidays reflect the same duality. And this is the answer to a famous question. I heard this answer from Yaakov Weinberg in front of the bracha. I heard it on a tape. I think it was a very, very good question. If you study the Mesilas Yesharim, and you want to get some points in this year, you can ask this question. In chapter 1, Mesilas Yesharim says, you have to know that you were created to be in the Olam Haba, and therefore everything you do has to be evaluated. Well, how will this get me to Olam Haba? He says it's the right thing to do to get me into Olam Haba. And don't be distracted by the pleasures of this world. Olam Haba is infinitely greater than the pleasures of this world, so don't be distracted and keep your eyes on Olam Haba. That's what it says in chapter 1. So Yaakov Weinberg asked, is this how I'm supposed to picture, let's say, the Chafetz Chaim? Chafetz Chaim gets up in the morning and says, listen, Don't fall for ice cream cones. Don't fall for trips up to the Alps. Don't fall for that. You're going for all of my board. Don't be stupid. Don't go after the small pleasures. Go for the big pleasure. That's how we're picturing the Chafetz Chaim? Not really. Not really. And especially says in chapter 18, the same book says that to serve God as a chassid in the highest possible level, you have to do it to give Him pleasure. To do it to give Him pleasure. For His sake. So what's going on in chapter 1? So here's the answer. Chapter 1, it's talking about what He wants. Not what we want. It talks about what He wants. It says He wants us to go to Olam Haba. The book starts with the words, the person has to know, Ma chovaso olamo. What is my obligation in this world? What is my obligation in this world? My obligation is to do what He wants. I'm obligated to Him. He's the creator of the universe. He gives me everything. So when I'm looking at my obligation, I'm looking at it from His point of view. What does He want? I'm doing what He wants because He wants it. In chapter 18, the Torah is telling us, what should my motivation be for doing it? My motivation for doing it should be to give Him pleasure. Now I'm going after Olam Haba, but not because I want it for myself, but because He wants it for me. So that's why chapter 1 is not selfish. But it could appear to be selfish if you don't have chapter 18 on board. At any rate, what He wants is that we should be in Olam Haba. What we want is to be able to give Him pleasure. It's again the same duality of perspective. This duality of perspective plays itself out in a number of different ways. That's what I'm just telling you here about in the Kiddush, where it says Chag HaMatzos. That's one thing to keep in mind. Okay. Then it says Man Cherusenu, a time of our freedom. And here, the Rabbi Zatzal used to stress this. There are other words in Hebrew for freedom, dror or chofesh. The Chazal here chose a specific word. Chofesh is particularly bad because chofesh is associated with death. B'meisim chofshi, the dead experience chofshi, that they're I will spell it a little bit because it's a philosophical idea. This is important in and of itself. What do rules do? Rule tells you either do this or don't do that.
Limiting.
Right. Every rule limits you. Every rule limits your freedom. When you're told, don't do X, X is off the list now. It's one of the things that you can't do. Before that you could, now you can't. When you're told, do X, it means some of your time and resources and effort has to be devoted to X. Otherwise, you've had more free time. No, now you have to do X. Every rule limits freedom. But some rules, in addition to limiting freedom, create freedom. Simultaneously, they do both. Here's a simple, superficial example. One-way traffic on the road. I go out on the road. 50% of the road is off limits. I lost 50% of the road. Yeah, but now imagine that everybody could drive on every part of the road they want. No one would get anywhere. Right? By losing 50%, you gain the ability to go and travel. You gain a freedom you didn't have before. Okay, but more profound than that, let's suppose we're playing chess. In the middle of the game, I take my knight, and I move it forward 3 spaces, straight forward, I take off your queen. So you say, you can't do that. I say, sure I can. Watch, I'll do it again. Here we are. 1, 2, 3, off with your queen. He said, no, but you're not allowed to do that. Who's telling me what to do? Excuse me. I'm a red-blooded American male. I do as I please. Don't push me around. Don't give me any restrictions and laws. I do as I please. I move them as I like. Okay, maybe you do. But if you do that, you can't play chess. You can't play the game of chess. The rules of chess, which dictate which moves to make, which moves not to make, those rules make possible an activity called playing chess. Without those rules, you can't play chess. So simultaneously with telling you you can't make certain moves and thereby restricting how you move the pieces on the board that make possible the playing of chess. So you say, come on, Rabbi, this is all trivial stuff. The traffic laws are obvious, and who cares about chess? Well, let's take something really important. Let's take language. How do you speak? Well, there are rules of language. Don't tell me what to do. Don't push me around. I speak as I like. I say, and plus blue. That's what I say. Okay. You can say that, but you can't communicate because and plus blue doesn't mean anything. The rules of language are the rules of meaning. If you follow the rules, many anyway, if you follow the rules, you mean something and then you can communicate. If you don't follow the rules, you can't communicate. The rules of language are very important because communication is very important. So the rules that tell you almost all combinations of words are off bounds because they don't mean anything. If you follow those rules, then you can communicate information to someone else. So some rules create freedoms in addition to limiting freedoms. Now, Chazal have a very profound remark here on this word, cherus. Cherus is the same letters as the words for engraved on stone. The Torah calls the 10 pronouncements at Sinai, which are engraved on the tablets, chorus alaluchos, engraved on the tablets. Rabbi Zatzal said, when you read here, Zman Cherusenu, a time of our freedom, think forward to Shavuos, which is where you're going anyway, because the freedom is for the sake of receiving the Torah at Sinai. We'll talk about that. Here's Hashem in a future shir. The rules of the Torah are chorus there. They give you the freedom of being engraved on the tablets, which then creates for you certain possibilities that otherwise you wouldn't have. Of course the rules limit you. Of course the rules limit your freedom. They take away your freedom. But they also create, and what they create is the ability to connect to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. They create the possibility of dveikus, of attachment to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So that's why the word cherusenu is used here. Not chofshenu and not drorenu, but cherusenu, to communicate this idea that the freedom that we got leaving Egypt wasn't the freedom to do as you please, cheeseburgers on Yom Kippur, soccer on Yom Kippur. That wasn't the freedom we're talking about. And it wasn't freedom in the normal sense of just being unbound, unlimited, and do as you please. No. It was the freedom that's made possible by a set of rules which enable us to achieve something that's outstandingly important. That's the tragedy of chofesh. Chofshi. It's very interesting. The word chofshi appears in Takam Onkelos. It's a translation of zar. Zar means a non-Kohen. He can't do the avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. He can't do the service because he's not a Kohen. So he's free. He's incapable. He's unqualified. He's on the wrong page. Yeah, and he doesn't have certain obligations. That's quite right. Because he's not capable of doing that tremendous service. That's the idea of chofshi. I certainly wouldn't want to use that. Okay. Here it says Zechel Yetzias Mitzrayim, a commemoration of the exodus from Egypt. That's obvious. Okay, then there's a repetition here. I'm not going to do that here because I've done it in other shiurim. I think that's all I want to say about Kiddush.
Oh.
Yeah.
The word chofshi is used. They describe an article for am chofshi liot. So it's like it's the wrong word to describe. Absolutely. That song is a failure in terms of real Jewish philosophy in many ways, but that is very striking. This is what they dreamt of in Surah and Pumbedisa in Babylonia, of soccer games on Yom Kippur and eating cheeseburgers and so on and so on. Chofshi, no restrictions, So the apologists will tell you, no, it meant free from the oppression of the oppressors. Yeah, maybe, but there's nothing positive in it. Nothing positive in the song at all. The only dream. This is our dream. Our dream is to be free. Free. This is it's a cliche, but something gets to be boring and a cliche because it's really true. Right? There's freedom from and freedom for. And freedom, in its essence, is freedom from. Means certain things don't apply to you. But if it isn't freedom for, so then it's absolutely worthless. We'll talk about that value of freedom on another occasion. But I have a whole share of that.
Okay. That's Kiddush. Urchatz. We spoke about this last time. The washing here, since it's not washing for bread, and although some say it's washing for the fact you're going to eat some vegetables, but many reject that pshat. It's the idea of having sanctified yourself, and having sanctified yourself, it gives you the ability to wash off things that are undesirable. And this, as we said last time, is where you start with the positive and then turn your attention to the negative. Karpas, which is one of the things that's done for the sake of it sounds simple, and so the children should ask, what's going on? And we'll see that in a moment that'll be very important, very, very significant. And you make a bracha, and you have in mind also that you're going to eat more later. Yachatz. Here you break the middle matzah in half. The bigger part you save for the afikoman, and the second part, the broken part, you leave there. And that's because one of the descriptions of matzah, especially for the Leila Seder, night of the Seder, is lechem oni, which can mean bread of impoverishment. I know they translate bread of affliction, but I think that translation is at least exaggerated. In Hebrew, ayin nun stands for poverty. It stands for not having the normal range of resources. A poor person is an oni in Hebrew. Ayin yud nun. Ayin nun yud. The word doesn't imply how he feels about being poor. There have been people who are voluntarily poor. In our tradition, people who just didn't want to have possessions. And they thought of themselves as very happy. In fact, one of the Talmidim of the Maggid Bitzrich said he has trouble with the bracha, Shasali Kotzarki, God has provided for all my needs, because he feels that he has unanswered needs, and he's not doesn't have them. He doesn't have what the kavanah should be, what the intention should be in making that bracha. The Maggid Bitzrich said, go to my Chosed Rav Zusha and ask him. Fine, he traveled to where Rav Zusha was, finds out where his address is, and goes in. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. A wooden table, a wooden chair, just not even the barest necessities. So the Talmud says to Rav Zusha, the Maggid sent me, I have trouble with the bracha Shosli Kotzarki, and he told me that you could help me understand that bracha because of the fact that I don't have what I need. So Rav Zusha said, I hate to say this, but I think the Maggid made a mistake. I can't help you. I have everything that I need, everything. I'm not missing anything. So how can I help you? So he looks around. Really? Wooden bowls. That's all you eat on. And I don't see any blankets on the bed. And I don't what do you mean? But that was his attitude. I have everything I need. I have everything I need. Because Baruch Hu gave me this, and that's all I need. So I don't need anything else. So I'm not missing anything. Not missing anything. So that's, an oni is someone who's lacking the natural resources. It doesn't mean that he's upset about it, feels deprived about it, is afflicted by it. I think that's the right pshat in the word oni. So lechem oni just means it's missing. Okay, you have your matzahs, and you'll get nice matzahs. They're either square or round, and they're full, and they're crisp, and they're very nice. That can't be called poor bread. You break it. You take the smaller half. You hold on to that. That's poor bread. But now, it's interesting is that you start off with 3 full matzahs, and you break one of them. You make it into poor bread. This, I think, indicates that it's something which is it's something that you're welcoming. You're not just stuck with it. You could have asked at the matzah factory, give me some broken pieces also. And then when you set up the Seder plate, you could have put a broken piece on it and said, okay, that's what I have. No, you make it that way. So I think that there's a positive attitude towards it. The Chazal used the phrase "mistapek b'mu'at." He makes do with a little. But makes do means he's not pining away for more. He's not cursing his lot because he's deprived. He makes do means he makes it enough. And there's a great value in that. Maybe this is related to the fact, as Chazal say, and it's based on a verse in Mishlei, that there is a test of being rich and a test of being poor. Shlomo Melech says, Pen ivaresh v'ganavti, pen ezba v'kichashti. Maybe I'll become impoverished and I will steal. Maybe I'll become satisfied and I will deny God. Now let's see. If you compare the failures, stealing is much lighter, much less serious than denying God. A person who has a little is upset by what he doesn't have, and he may lead himself to take what doesn't belong to him. A person who's satisfied and who worked for it wants to take credit, if that's a whole essay on this, right? Wants to take credit for the fact that he worked for it. He doesn't want to see it as a gift from God. Because if it's a gift from God, then you don't get credit for it. You didn't build it. You didn't make it. So you don't want to give God credit. So having a lot leads a person to denying God. That's much worse. So a person should say that if I have a choice between the two, I choose poverty because I don't want to be subject to the greater spiritual temptations. In fact, when I have argued to people that the quality of life that Jewish people enjoys, on average, is much higher than the quality of life of the peoples around us, sometimes the critique will be, let's look at the mean income, and let's ask how many millionaires you have, and so on and so on. Now, in our times, they probably would lose on that as well. But even if we didn't have so many millionaires, I said to them, we don't want millionaires. We don't regard making $1 million as a great spiritual success. On the contrary, it's a great spiritual temptation. To have what you need, let's be very extravagant, to have what you need guaranteed, or as guaranteed as you can have in this world, that's the ideal condition. Not having extra money that you can't spend. What does Bill Gates do with $40 billion? That's what he has left. He used to have $60 billion. Right? They're giving it away.
He has hundreds of billions.
What's his name? Elon Musk. 225 billion. He's $225 billion. You know, if he were 1 million people, he couldn't spend that money.
That's true.
I think he'll spend it.
Anyway, so
That's why he has a space program. He has nothing better to do with his money.
he's challenging Putin to one-on-one combat to end the prize of Ukraine.
That was great.
Okay, Yachatz. Now comes Magid. Now here I just want to give you a little bit of background because this is going to be very important later. There are 4 mitzvos d'oraisa, 4 biblical commandments that apply to a Jew on the night of Pesach that have to do with Pesach. I'm not talking about Kriya Shema that you say every night. No. There are 4 biblical Pesach commandments that apply to you on the night of Pesach. One is eating the Korban Pesach, Paschal sacrifice. One is eating Matzah. One is eating moror, some kind of bitter herbs. And one is telling the story of the Exodus from Egypt. Of course, now that we don't have the Beis HaMikdash, we can't bring the Korban Pesach, Paschal sacrifice. The bitter herbs we could do, but the biblical Torah has lapsed because it's tied to the Korban Pesach. Matzah still exists as a mitzvah d'oraisa. And of course, the mitzvah of telling the story is... the question is how they're related. Is it just 4 different things you have to do, different responsibilities? or they're related in some more intimate way. The Seder, the word Seder means order, organization. What is it? Organizing. I think one of the things that's organizing is the relationship among the four mitzvos. We'll see that later on in the Hagaddah, where it discusses it more or less explicitly. But it's something that should be in your minds, that there are these three mitzvahs of eating and one mitzvah of telling, explaining, and experiencing, as we'll see. We are now up to the beginning of the mitzvah of telling the story. And the first thing you do is you lift up the Seder plate and you uncover the middle matzah, the broken one, and you say the following words. Now, okay, I'll explain this in a second. This is the bread of impoverishment that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Called the fin Yeshivat Ohr Somayach, anybody who is needy, let him come and eat. Called the tzrich Yeshivat Yifsach, anybody who needs it should come and join in our Paschal sacrifice. Ashatahocha, now we are here, L'shana Haba b'Aretz Yisrael. Next year we should be in the land of Israel. Shata Avdei L'shana Haba b'nei Chorin, now we are slaves. Next year we should be free. Now, this is said in Aramaic because we are quoting words that were said in the ancient times, and in the ancient times, the end of the Second Temple period, our people spoke Aramaic. Our texts were in Hebrew, but the language spoken on the street was Aramaic. These words were not spoken where we speak them. They were not spoken at the beginning of their Seder. The proof of it is, some of the words invite the person to share your Paschal sacrifice. Well, the only way to share a Paschal sacrifice is to be counted as a member of the group for this Paschal sacrifice before it's slaughtered in the afternoon. No one can join at night. So these words, called the tzrich Yifsach, must have been spoken in the afternoon. They couldn't have been spoken at night at the Seder. So what we are doing here is we are quoting words that were said in the Paschal procedure at various times, and quoting them in the vernacular. Now, it starts with holach ma'anya. This is the bread of impoverishment that our ancestors ate. It starts with those words because, all the commentators say, the Maharal stresses this, because another explanation of the word in Hebrew, lechem oni, is lechem she'onim alav dvarim harbe, the bread over which many things are said. So apparently, saying is related to the bread. Somehow it's related to the bread. So the very first thing we do with Magid is to display the bread and say, this is the bread, which our ancestors ate, and we call it lachma anya, which is the Aramaic translation of lechem oni, which our ancestors ate there, and we're displaying it in order to express the idea that everything we say from here on out is being said on the bread. It's being said in part to reveal certain characteristics of the bread that are relevant to the experience tonight. Now, I just mentioned this. Our ancestors ate this in Egypt. When did they eat it? How long were we in Egypt? 210 years. How many years of slavery were there?
80.
How many?
80.
I can't hear you.
80.
About 90, a little more than 90, right? The rest of the time, when Joseph was alive, or when his brothers were alive, we were the upper class. We were the nobility. We came down with Jacob. We were close to the Pharaoh, to the king. The slavery came in the last 90 or so years of the... Matzah is the bread of impoverishment because, number one, it's cheap. It's just flour and water. No oil, no seasoning, no other ingredients. Number two, because it's unleavened. It cooks fast. You'll go to the matzah baking if you haven't done it. How long does it take to bake matzah?
Seconds.
Okay, very good. some people make a mistake and they say it's 18 minutes. It's not true. 18 minutes is how long the oven can operate before, and the tables and the implements for that has to be cleaned, right? But the actual average time for matzah is from the time the water hits the flour to the time it comes out of the oven is 12 or 13 minutes. If you're a slave and you are hungry, you come home at night, you're not going to make a dough and punch it down and then wait an hour for it to rise and punch it down again and wait for it to rise again and then put it in the oven and bake it and eat the bread 4 hours later. You're not going to do that. You want something where you can slap it on the wall of the oven, take it out in 3 minutes, and you're ready to eat. So that's one of the reasons why it's the bread that we ate as slaves, because of the fact that we were slaves. Okay, that's fine. But there's one other time that we ate. One other time when we ate matzah, and that's the night that we had the Seder. Were we slaves then? Not really. 9 of the plagues had taken place. We had stopped serving the Egyptians months ago. And then we left Egypt. 24 hours later, when we got to the first resting place, the Torah testifies that we ate matzah there also. Even though we didn't have to, we ate matzah there also. So we've got to be very careful. Matzah is a complex reality. It's not just the bread of slavery. It's a complex reality. It has many different dimensions. Now we say, okay, all right, I'll leave you to think about this for tomorrow. In the last part of this little paragraph, it says 2 things which are questionable. One is, Hashata hocha l'shana boa b'arad Israel. Now we are here. Next year, let us be the land of Israel. What are you going to have in mind when you say that? Seeing is how you're sitting here in Yerushalayim, Yer Kodesh. And secondly, Shata Avdei l'shana boa b'nei chorin. Is everybody, everywhere, enslaved? That we should say that we're all slaves and we're so think about that for tomorrow.